back, ladies and gentlemen. You may be seated. We'll continue on with the state calling their next witness.
State calls Detective Brett Robertson.
You solemnly swear the testimony you are about to give in this matter before the court is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. Okay.
All right, I'll just pull yourself up there. Thank you, sir. You may remove your mask if you're comfortable while you testify, and only one person talks at a time because she's taking it all down. All right.
Detective, please state your name and spell your last name for the record, please.
Brett Robertson, Robertson.
And how are you employed?
Through the City of Oshkosh Police Department.
And are you a detective?
I am.
How long have you been employed in that capacity?
Total 18 years as a law enforcement officer, detective for approximately 11 years.
I'd like to direct your attention to the events of August 4th, 2020. On that date, did you participate in the investigation of a shooting at 1715 Minnesota Street in the city of Oshkosh?
Yes, I did.
Where did you go when you were called in?
I initially responded to the police department, and then I traveled to Mercy Medical Center.
And why did you go to Mercy?
One of the victims, Rebecca Borkowski, was being treated for injuries, and I was to speak with her as she was still able to talk, and that's what I did.
Was Rebecca cooperative in answering all of your questions at the hospital?
Yes, she was.
Did Rebecca ask you to check on anyone else unrelated to this case?
She did ask that we also check with Josh Aide's ex-wife. I believe her name is Samantha.
And was that check, safety check she was referring to?
That is correct.
While Rebecca was in the hospital, did she give officers consent to remain on her property and search her property?
She did.
Did she also give officers consent to search her vehicles?
Yes.
After talking to Rebecca, where did you go?
To 1715 Minnesota Street.
And while there, did you participate in a search of Rebecca's garage?
I did.
Can you describe that search?
It was a thorough search. We were trying to locate spent casings as well as bullets trajectory and to recover any extra bullet or bullet fragments as well. Also photographing thoroughly, just documenting where everything was and laid out.
And as part of that search, did you move all the items around that were in the garage so you could guarantee thoroughness?
Yes.
And can you just describe what you did in moving those items?
I started with photographs and video that I took of the scene in that area. And then we methodically just went through different areas, mainly specifically where it was reported that Rebecca was found, which was like on the passenger side of the Tahoe that was in the garage, and then just outside the garage, and then proceeded over towards the driver's side of the Tahoe, where we had methodically gone through items that were stacked up and just miscellaneous items in the garage just to determine if there were any bullet fragments, spent casings, or if we could even determine the trajectory or path of one of the rounds that was reportedly fired.
And how many officers participated in the search of the garage?
I remember Detective Fry, Detective Wilson, and myself, I believe, were the main three that searched that area.
I'd like to show you what's been marked as Defense Exhibits 17 and 18.
Are you able to put them up?
Are those, well, can you just describe to the jury what that is?
Exhibit 17 is a photograph that depicts me in blue jeans and my black shoes. I took a photograph of a black and color Oshkosh Defense. I would describe it as like a reusable grocery bag, and some contents that I had located inside. Exhibit 18 is a photograph of one of the contents that I had located inside, which was a handgun magazine for Smith & Wesson that did have live rounds inside of it.
Okay, and that exhibit, or both those exhibits, I believe, have already been admitted to the defense, but I would just ask to publish them. I believe the defense attorney has it on his computer. So that's the bag you're referring to, and then the next exhibit. And that would be the cartridge.
Those are the two exhibits that I'm describing. Yes.
Now, I would like to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 48. Is that an overview of the scene that night?
It is.
Can you just describe where in the garage you would have located that Oshkosh Defense bag?
If you look at, if you're facing the photograph, so on the right-hand side, you'll see a extension ladder.
Let me just stop you for a minute. Maybe if you use the mic, there should be a mic there. If you could just point to where you found it for the jury.
On the right-hand side of the garage where the extension ladder is, in this foam padding that is a weed whacker. I believe the bag was right in this general area, right in there.
Okay. And was it over items or under items, or do you recall how it was positioned in that area?
It was under items, like it had been covered. I had to remove items off it to locate it.
Okay. And did you find any guns in the garage that night?
No.
Looking at that exhibit again, can you describe for the jury, apart from the blood that's surrounding the deceased victim's head, where else on the driveway at Rebecca's yard did you locate any blood?
Specifically, we had located blood, I believe somewhere down in this area. Located blood in this area. Located blood inside the garage, at a passenger side of the vehicle over in this area. Obviously where the deceased is.
Okay, and then in the garage, by the passenger side of the vehicle there, was that where the blood was contained to, or at any point did you see blood that led to the Oshkosh Defense Bag area?
It was contained to that area. I didn't see any blood that I remember leading towards or in this area at all.
And when you were pointing on the picture to the blood down toward the bottom of the picture, is that the west side of Rebecca's house?
It is.
And let me show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 56 and 57. blood droplet you're referring to?
Yes.
Okay, I would just ask to publish that to the jury. Thank you. And then the next one is a close-up, is that correct?
That is correct, by the garden rose there, yes.
Okay. And in terms of entryways to Rebecca's house, are there any doors on that lower level of the west side of her house?
Not on the west side of the house, no.
And where is the nearest door?
It would be on the north side of the house.
Did you observe any blood droplets that would have led toward that door on the north side of the house?
No.
Did you also observe blood droplets, or what appeared to be blood droplets, in driveways to the south?
I did.
And did you take swabs of those blood droplets?
I did.
Did you also take swabs of the blood droplets there by the west side of Rebecca's house?
I did.
And the blood inside the garage, by the south side of the garage? Inside the garage?
Yes.
And did you take swabs from the blood droplet in the grass?
Yes.
And did you submit those swabs into evidence?
I did.
Did you subsequently collect a DNA sample from John Miller?
I did.
Was he cooperative in providing that to you?
Absolutely.
On August 5th, the day after the incident, did you speak with Rebecca Borkowski?
Yes.
As part of that meeting, did you discuss guns that she owned?
I did.
Was Rebecca forthcoming in discussing the firearms she owned?
Yes.
As part of that discussion, did she, on the 5th, did she mention that she owned a .380?
She did.
And was she cooperative in answering all of your questions that day?
Yes.
Did you also speak with her again on August 11th?
Yes.
Did she also make reference to her .380 on that day?
She did.
I'd like to talk to you about August 14th, 2020. Did you return to Rebecca's residence that day?
We did.
Why did you go there?
We were still trying to determine bullet travel or direction from the victim, John Miller. And so I wanted to search the neighboring residences, the sidewalls of those homes, and it was daylight, and just to see if there a bullet had struck, adjacent house, or maybe even Rebecca's home or garage, and we had missed it.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibits 64 through 67. Do those appear to be photos that you would have taken when you returned to Rebecca's residence that day?
Yes.
And I would move to admit State's Exhibits 64 through 67 into evidence and publish to the jury as we go through them.
Any objection? No objection, except I received the exhibits.
That exhibit there, State's Exhibit 64, can you just describe what that is, how that's relevant?
That image is of State Exhibit 65.
Do you mind if I grab those that I just gave you just to see how they're labeled?
All right, that State's Exhibit 64 there?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Can you describe the relevance?
Specifically, if you look to the left of the blue garbage can, you'll see there is a, I believe it's my ruler, some tools and kind of letting out. But in that area, in the concrete control joint that runs north and south, is where located a pristine jacket of a bullet that had gone down and was probably 3 or 4 inches down in the concrete in the driveway.
And can you just describe for the jury what a jacket is?
In most handgun rounds, or any round for a regular handgun, you have a jacket, which is normally, it could be a copper or brass coating on the outside that covers a lead projectile or a lead bullet that's within the jacket. So basically a covering that is over another piece of metal.
Okay, and moving on to Exhibit 65. And is that just a closer up of the scene that you're talking about there?
It is. It's Detective Hinkie in the photograph, and by the ruler is the exact area where that piece of jacket was located, down on the concrete control joint.
And moving on to 66. Can you describe what that is?
That is the jacket from the round that was right next to the control joint in that area where I found it. Maybe 8 inches or so off the foundation of the residence.
And so when you found it, was it in that joint there?
It was down towards basically the ground underneath the driveway concrete slab.
And what did you need to do to get it out? Was it pretty far in?
It was. We used, as you can see in the photographs, pieces of coat hanger. We tried scissors, and we were able to just finagle it out a little bit.
Okay. And moving on to Exhibit 67. Is that just a close-up of the jacket you were referencing?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you collect that item as evidence?
Yes.
And did you turn it into the Oshkosh Police Department evidence room?
Yes.
In early September of 2020, did Rebecca contact you regarding return of her guns?
She did.
And was that seeking return of the guns that were collected in the warrant that was done in her house?
Yes.
And can you just describe what you told her at that point?
I would have to check with the DA's office before returning any of the guns. We had collected those to make sure that they were involved in this incident in any way. And she had brought forward that we had not located the .380 handgun.
So she brought that to your attention?
Yes.
And that's the .380 she was discussing with you the day after the shooting incident?
Yes.
And did she voluntarily turn that over to officers?
Later she did. I believe she turned it over to Detective Artz.
As part of your role in this case, did you do a download of any cell phones?
I did, yes.
And whose cell phone did you download?
Rebecca's cell phone, the victim James Gruettner, and John Miller's.
And what program do you use to do those downloads?
The program is called Celebrate. It's a Celebrate data extraction tool.
And can you just briefly describe what it's able to do?
The tool is able to extract data off your cellular device to include calls, text messages, instant messages, Facebook messages, certain apps like WhatsApp, etc., images, videos, notes that you might have on your phone, emails. So basically, it can gather a lot of information off the device, location information, etc.
And does that generate a written report?
I generate that report, yes. The program allows you to do that, yeah.
And did you make that report available to an analyst with the Oshkosh Police Department, Victoria Hyman?
Yes.
While you were investigating this case, when you returned on August 5th, did you use your cell phone to record the scene of the crime?
Yes, I believe it was a video that had been taken.
I'd like to just play that to give the jury a more thorough picture of the scene, and as we go through, I'll stop and ask you just a couple questions. This is on thumb drive exhibit 7. This will be 7K. I'm playing from the beginning to 35 seconds. Where that stopped there, is that the scene we were just viewing in the concrete where the jacket was located?
Yes.
Now moving on, I'm gonna continue from 35 seconds to 1 minute, 26 seconds. Would that be a view from someone standing just outside the garage looking toward that scene there?
Yes.
As part of this case, did you have a chance to look at a map John Miller had drawn regarding his path of travel when he ran from the defendant?
I can't honestly say if I reviewed John Miller's map, but I believe I've been told the area in which he believes he ran.
You can move on from 1 minute, 26 seconds to 1 minute, 59 seconds. Can you just describe the significance of that corner there?
That is where we had located John's shoe, I believe it was. And there was a broken flower pot, I believe we just saw.
Now moving on from there through 234. Are all of those blood droplets in the driveway at 1719, the house just to the south of Rebecca's.
Yes.
And now if we can just move on to the end. The end of the video is at 4:18. Those spots that you're pointing out, are those suspected blood droplets?
Yes.
I have no further questions.
Russ?
Thank you. Detective Robertson, now those blood droplets that we were just looking at in the video, there's no type of what I call, or you would call a cast-off analysis that can be done with those, correct?
No.
And by that, I mean that there's no way to determine which direction any person was moving when those blood droplets came in contact with the cement, correct?
No.
Now, you testified that at one point, Rebecca had called you asking to see if she could get her guns back, correct?
Yes, sir.
When was that?
I believe it was September 3rd.
And you had told her essentially, no, you couldn't give them back, correct?
Correct.
And only after then you told her no, then she volunteered to you that she had another gun, correct?
I don't know exactly how the conversation started. I believe it was more towards, there had been another one that had been found and that prompted my phone call to her. And it was, part of that phone call was that she also wanted to know if she could get her guns back for, to have her for her own self-defense.
Did you do a supplement to this report about this?
Yes.
So you don't know now the order that it went, whether she asked for her gun back first, and then after you told her no, she volunteered there was another gun?
I don't know specifically how the conversation had started, but it was a mix of basically both of those parts of the conversation.
Now, regarding that bullet jacket that was located in the cement crack, what day did you locate that?
I believe it was August 14th.
And that was after the cement had already been cleaned, correct?
To my knowledge, yes.
We saw the blood from the video, all that was gone, right?
I believe so.
And you located that bullet jacket, I think you said it was approximately 3-4 inches down in that crack?
I'd say it's approximately 8 inches or so away from the foundation, maybe 3 to 4 inches deep in the crack.
And when you conducted the search that night of August 4th, you didn't locate that jacket, correct?
I did not know.
And it's metallic, so that's something you'd expect to shine off a flashlight, right?
Yes, sir.
And with your knowledge of firearms, and specifically your testimony that that jacket is something that would have encased another metal component of a projectile, would you say it's fairly impossible that that bullet, that jacket that you found had just managed to fall right inside of that crack?
I couldn't necessarily say that it fit down there. I do know the night of, I looked out there pretty extensively and didn't see that jacket. And I do recall also moving those garbage cans that night and stuff as well around the perimeter and didn't locate it.
So you're fairly confident that that jacket was not there the night of August 4th?
I wouldn't say not there as present on the scene. I just didn't observe it or find it in that control joint crack that night. And I can also say that I didn't look in that control joint the night of August 4th.
You went over the area with your flashlight though, right?
Yes.
And as previously testified to your knowledge, that cement had all, that driveway had all been cleaned, somehow scrubbed down, free of the blood, correct?
I don't know if it was done professionally. I believe it was, but I think it was clean.
And now you testified on the night of August 4th. When you returned to the scene, you took part in the searching of the garage, correct?
Yes.
And you did that with Detectives Fry and Wilson, correct?
Yes.
And Detective Fry and Wilson had also searched the house, correct?
Yes.
But you didn't take part in the search of the house?
I was in the house and I do remember searching certain areas, assisting with evidence packaging.
What areas of the house did you search?
I remember specifically being upstairs in the, I would say, office room, bedroom, that upstairs area.
Who else was searching upstairs?
I believe Sergeant Nelson was.
Who was searching downstairs, that you recall?
I don't recall specifically, possibly Detective Ang.
And did you see the other detectives and officers while you were searching, also conducting their search?
Yes, yes.
And did it appear based upon your observations of the other officers searching the house that you were doing they were doing a meticulous search of the house?
I would say we were searching the house. I don't necessarily know if I'd use the word meticulous, but we were trying to do a thorough search of the house, yes.
You used the word meticulous twice when you searched the garage, correct?
We did.
And you searched that as thorough as you searched the house?
I would say no.
You searched the house more thoroughly?
I would say search the garage more thoroughly.
But the house of the search was thorough as well, based upon your observations, correct?
It was thorough. We just didn't manipulate and move a lot of the property around, or at least I didn't, as we partook in the garage.
And in the garage, you found the bag identified by Defense Exhibit number 17, correct?
Yes, sir.
And when you found that bag, you opened it, correct?
Yes, sir.
And it's common when officers, during conducting the search, be it of a house, a garage, or anything, when they come across a bag, you look inside of it, fair to say?
Fair to say yes.
And that's what you did with the Oshkosh Defense bag, correct?
Yes.
And inside of it, you found the magazine identified in Defense Exhibit number 18, correct?
Correct.
If I could please have number 18 published. And that's a Smith & Wesson magazine, correct?
Yes.
And particularly 380 caliber Smith & Wesson.
Yes.
And there's one bullet that appears to be missing from the magazine, correct?
It appears so.
And that's, you can tell that because of the red mark by number 6, correct?
Yes.
That would suggest that the handgun it belongs to had a bullet in the chamber. Would that be fair to say?
I wouldn't say necessarily, it potentially could, yes. I also know that, I believe there was a loose round that I found in that bag as well. I don't believe it's in this, Exhibit 17.
Wasn't that loose round that you found in the bag, a 9mm?
It could be. I'd have to review either the report or the evidence log.
Do you recall finding a 9mm round as well?
If it is in my report as a 9mm, it would be correct. I can't remember offhand if it was 380 or if it was a 9mm.
May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
His report, you want to see?
Detective, I'm showing you, or providing you what's been pre-marked as Defense Exhibit number 16. Can you identify what that is?
That is a supplement, 9 pages in length, written by myself, dated August 4th, 2020.
And I'd ask you to turn to page 4 of 9.
I'm there.
And the second paragraph. I'd ask that you review that, and then once you're done, let me know, and I'm going to ask if that reflects your recollection.
I reviewed it, it does.
And Detective Robertson, from the opportunity that you had to see Defense Exhibit number 16, did it appear to be an accurate copy of your police report in this case?
Yes.
I move Exhibit 16 in evidence.
I think it was just used to refresh recollections. I don't know that it needs to be moved into evidence.
It won't be accepted at this point.
And after reviewing the second paragraph on page 4, do you recall now what you located inside that bag?
It was a loose 9mm round in a magazine with what usually 5 380 rounds in the magazine.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but with the semi-automatic pistol that the magazine such as this would belong to, when you insert the magazine and then pull the slide back, that takes a bullet from the magazine and puts it in the barrel, correct?
Mr. Seaman, move on towards the light.
I already asked the question, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you load a magazine into a semi-automatic pistol, like a Smith & Wesson 380, and then you pull the slide back, that takes a bullet from the magazine and puts it in the barrel, correct?
That is correct. You're chambering one round.
And you later spoke with Rebecca regarding this bag that you had found, correct?
Yes.
And in fact, she had told you that this was a bag that she kept in her vehicle, correct?
It was a bag that she utilized to move contents out of one vehicle to another.
And so the contents of that bag contained items that she had kept in her vehicle, correct?
Yes.
No further questions.
Any regret?
Just briefly, so the cartridge that Mr. Seaman was talking about, which with one round that appeared not in it, you really have no idea where that round was or anything about it, do you?
Other than what she told me that it was from contents from her vehicle, from moving from one vehicle to the other, no.
Sure, but regarding the one bullet that Mr. Seaman noted was not in that cartridge, do you have any idea about the status of where that bullet is or anything to do with it?
No.
And you testified that that bag was on the opposite side of the garage is where Rebecca was located, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Was there any, well, let me back up. Based on your understanding of Rebecca's injuries, would you expect to see some blood droplets or some sort of evidence that she had made her way across the garage? Had she done that?
Yes.
And did you see any evidence of blood droplets leading to where you found the bag on the completely other side of the garage under a bunch of boxes?
No, I did not.
And when you were searching in the house, did you see any evidence of blood droplets in Rebecca's house anywhere?
No, I did not.
Was there any indication that either John or Rebecca had entered Rebecca's house that night?
No.
No further questions.
Amy Cross?
No.
You may step down.
Thank you, Ron.
Take the call, next witness.
State House Detective Jeremy Wilson.
You solemnly swear the testimony you are about to give in this matter before the court is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Pull yourself up. You don't have to be right up to the mic. You may take your mask off if you want while you testify, if you're comfortable, and only one person talks at a time. She gets it in.
Okay.
Who's that?
Can you state your name and spell your last name for the record, please?
My name is Jeremy Wilson, W-I-L-S-O-N.
How are you employed?
I'm a detective with the City of Oshkosh Police Department.
And how long have you been employed in that capacity?
I've been with the City of Oshkosh for a little over 16 total years. I've been a detective for 8.5 of those years.
I'd like to direct your attention to the events of August 4th, 2020. On that date, did you participate in the investigation of a shooting at 1715 Minnesota Street in the City of Oshkosh?
Yes,
Is that in Winnebago County, Wisconsin?
correct.
And what was your understanding of the situation when you became involved?
When I became involved, the scene was secure at the residence, and we were looking for the alleged shooter. So when I got in, everybody was some of the victims were at hospitals. There was one victim that passed away, was still on the scene, and then I worked on trying to locate Joshua Aide.
And what did you do specifically to try to locate him?
I did a emergency ping request through T-Mobile.
Can you describe what a ping request is for the jury?
Ping request is when we request information specifically on the location of a phone. So they're able to provide us the location of a phone, T-Mobile, every 15 minutes in this case, and then depending on the ping, how close of an area they're able to give us where that phone is located.
And when you were doing this ping request, were you also working with a woman, a crime analyst at the police department named Victoria Heidemann in mapping these pings?
Yes, I was.
And how does that work?
She has a program, Cellhawk, I believe it's called, where she's able to map those on a computer to show the progress of those pings. I think the mapping actually occurred at a different time or a later time.
And that night, when you were trying to locate the defendant, what did the pings tell you?
The pings show us travel eventually towards in his final location back at his residence in Greene County.
On August 5th, did you travel to Greene County Impound Garage?
I did with Detective Dean Artz.
And what was your purpose of going there?
Detective Dean Artz had obtained a search warrant to search the red Toyota RAV4 that was driven by Joshua Aide back to his residence.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibits 68 through 70. I'm sorry, through 71.
I think you already have 71.
Thank you.
Do those appear to be photographs related to your search of his vehicle?
Yes, they are.
Your Honor, I believe 71's already been admitted, but I would move to admit State's Exhibits 68 through 70 and publish 68 through 71 to the jury.
Any objection?
No, sir.
After receive the exhibits, you may publish them.
Is that the defendant's vehicle?
Yes, it is.
And moving on to 79, or 69, I'm sorry.
Keep them away from your mic.
Can you describe, as we're going through these, what you found in the vehicle?
So, excuse me. So I primarily searched the passenger side of the vehicle. This would be the on State Exhibit 69. That was how the front seat of the vehicle looked before we searched that vehicle. Detective Artz had taken pictures prior to us actually starting the search of that vehicle.
And moving on to State's Exhibit 70. What is that showing?
This was after the search had started, where it had located a Taurus 45 caliber revolver. That's where it was located on the floor where the picture was taken.
Okay. And moving on to Exhibit 71. Is that just a closer up view of that revolver?
Yes, it is.
And just to be clear, is that a second gun? Let me back up. You're aware that a .380 was located on the defendant when he was taken into custody in Greene County, correct?
Correct.
So this was an additional gun that was located in his car when it was impounded?
Correct.
And are you aware of whether that firearm was loaded?
It was loaded. We removed the rounds to make it safe prior to transporting it.
And was that something you were able to see just by looking at it?
You can see when you handle it from the back end that there was rounds in the revolver, yes.
Okay, and if we just zoom in on that for you. Can you tell from looking at that there whether it's loaded?
Without removing the rounds, I can tell that there are casings in there. Obviously, I didn't know they were used or unused until I removed them out of the gun. They were unused rounds, so the gun was loaded and ready to be shot.
What else did you locate in the vehicle of significance?
There was some mail that had Joshua Aide's name on it. We also located an open bottle of beer in the center console in Exhibit numbers, the state exhibit is 69, you can see there's 2 unopened bush lights in the door.
Sure, if we could just move back to that.
It's shown in both state exhibit 69 and 70, those 2 cans in that passenger door were identified as bush light.
As part of this case, did you do a download of a phone owned by the defendant?
Yes, I did.
And is that something that generates a report?
Yes.
And did you make that report available to an analyst with the Oshkosh Police Department, Victoria Heidemann?
Yes, I did.
No further questions.
Any cross?
Yes, sir. Now, Detective Wilson, you just testified that regarding that Taurus Judge, there was no way to tell if it was actually loaded unless you removed the cylinder and checked the rounds, correct?
Correct. I'd have to know if the rounds were shot before, or if they were just empty casings, or if they were regular rounds, unused.
Or it'd be an unsafe practice, but if you look down the front of it, you'd be able to see if it was loaded, potentially because you'd be able to see if they were live projectiles, right?
Correct.
And regarding exhibit number 69, if we could have that one back, please. You testified that in the center console there, that was a partially drank bottle of beer?
I don't recall if it was partially drank or how much was left in there. It was just an open container of alcohol, and I don't remember how much was in there.
No further questions, thank you.
Nothing further.
Any step up? On the next witness.
State calls Detective Dean Artz.
You solemnly swear the testimony you are about to give in this matter before the court is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
One person talks at a time, and if you want, you may take your mask off if you're comfortable while you're just.
Can you state your name and spell your last name for the record, please?
Dean Artz, A-R-T-U-S.
How are you employed?
I'm a detective with the City of Oshkosh Police Department,
And how long have you been employed in that capacity?
just over 29 years.
I'd like to direct your attention to August 4th, 2020. On that date, did you participate in the investigation of a shooting at 1715 Minnesota Street in the city of Oshkosh?
I did.
And what was your understanding of the situation when you first became involved?
I responded to the scene initially, and there had been 2 victims that had been transported to local hospitals from the scene upon my arrival, and there was 1 victim still on scene that had been declared deceased.
Are you aware of what time the 911 call came in for that incident?
It was 8:27 p.m.
And were you lead detective in this case?
I was.
Where did you go when you were first called in? Did you go right to the scene?
Yes.
And what happened next?
Once I arrived on scene, I instructed the officers on scene to secure the scene and basically back out, get the perimeter set. Got some basic information from the officers and what had transpired. At that point, I returned to the police department to write a search warrant to process the scene.
And were Were you aware when you wrote the search warrant whether the homeowner, Rebecca Borkowski, had consented to a search of her home?
Yes, I was aware of that.
That she had consented?
Yes, I believe she had given officer's consent.
And what happened after that?
I prepared the affidavit for the search warrant, and eventually the search warrant was signed at approximately 12:05 a.m.
And then what happened after that was signed?
I produced the search warrant to the detectives on scene, and they processed the scene.
Did you have any role further in processing the scene?
I did not.
And why is that?
At approximately 11:37 p.m., I was contacted, or Oshkosh Police was contacted, that Greene County Sheriff's Department had taken Joshua Aide in custody in their jurisdiction.
Where did you go upon learning that?
Upon learning that, myself and Detective Hinkie traveled to the City of Oregon Police Department, where we took custody of Mr. Aide.
And I'm sorry, who did you, so where was Mr. Aide taken by Greene County deputies?
The City of Oregon, Wisconsin Police Department?
So that's where you traveled to that night?
Correct.
And did anyone travel with you?
Detective Hinkie?
Did Greene County deputies turn over some items of evidence to you?
Yes, it did.
And what was that?
Deputy Mayor from Greene County Sheriff's Department turned over to me a firearm with a holster that was loaded, along with a second loaded magazine for a gun, as well as his Samsung Galaxy S8 cell phone and wallet and its contents, and I believe there were some headphones as well.
I've handed you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 72. Is that a box containing the items that you just described?
This box contains the .380 Ruger pistol with the cloth holster and the magazine that was in the gun.
I would ask to move State's Exhibit 72 into evidence and to allow the detective to open the box and walk around to show the jury the firearm.
Any objection?
No objection.
All right. Let's see Exhibit 72.
And can you describe again the make and model of the firearm?
Yes, it is a Ruger LCP .380 caliber pistol.
And is there a red laser affixed to it?
Yes.
Did you make contact with the defendant Joshua Aide that day?
I did.
And that was at the Oregon Police Department?
Yes.
Do you see Joshua Aide in the courtroom today?
Yes.
Can you identify him by what he's wearing?
He's seated at the defense table, gray suit, blue shirt, wearing glasses.
The individual two to my left?
That's correct.
And I would just ask that the record reflect the witness has identified the defendant.
Which,
How did he appear to you when you made contact with him?
He appeared intoxicated to me.
And what was notable about his appearance or demeanor that made you believe he was intoxicated?
He had bloodshot eyes. He was fairly unstable with his walk. And later I could smell alcohol as well.
I'd like to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibits 73 through 80. Would those be pictures of the defendant as he appeared to you when you made contact with him that night?
Yes.
Now, I'm just going to scroll through the pictures and then excuse me. Your Honor, I would just ask that State's Exhibit 73 through 80 be moved into evidence and to publish them electronically to the jury.
Any objection?
No objection.
Is that a full view of the defendant as he appeared that night in State's Exhibit 73?
Yes.
We could just move on to 74. A little closer view.
Yes.
And 75.
Yes.
That's his face.
Patient, yes.
76.
Back, yes.
77.
Top of hands, yes.
78.
Palms of his hands.
79.
Shoe,
And 80.
another shoe.
Did you observe any injuries to the defendant?
I did not.
Can you describe any conversation you had with him?
I attempted to interview him, and he did not wish to give a statement about what happened. I asked him if he was injured in any way. He stated he was not. He acted confused as to why he was in custody and what he had been arrested for. When I informed him he was arrested for homicide, he asked who he supposedly had killed.
And did you record that conversation with him?
I did.
I'd like to play for you a couple portions of that conversation. This is on the thumb drive, State's Exhibit 7, and this one will be 7L. And I'll be playing it. It's a little grainy audio, but is that the defendant saying to you that that didn't happen?
Yes.
I'd like to move on to 8:57 to 9:32.
I literally rolled into my driveway and there were like 14 police officers there that couldn't tell me what they were charging me with.
on to 11 to 11:10.
Anyway, from today, like fragment injuries, no, from military stuff. No.
Okay, good night. Was that him denying too that he had any injuries?
Yes.
And moving on to 12:45 to 13:14.
Well, when you get your criminal complaint in a day or two. Okay. That's from your uncle. Right. Well, I'm not going to give you the privilege or the pleasure to know who you killed. Okay? One of the 3 people you shot tonight, how's that? Who I gave 2 counts of attempted murder, so 2 of your 3 lived. There you go. Who I killed. Come on. You know.
Detective Artz, throughout your entire time with the defendant at the Oregon Police Department, did he continue denying any knowledge of a shooting or why you were there?
Yes.
Where did you take him from the Oregon Police Department?
From the Oregon Police Department, we traveled back to Oshkosh, and he was booked in the Winnebago County Jail.
And did he make any comments on the drive home?
None.
Was he awake or asleep during the drive back?
I would say he probably slept some. He was awake. He did make like small talk every now and then, but nothing of substance to this case.
At any point, did he indicate to you that he had any injuries from that night?
Never.
At any point, did he indicate to you that he was the victim of a crime?
Never.
As part of your investigation, did you meet with a man named Scott Balthazar?
I spoke to him over the phone, yes.
And who is he in relation to Joshua Aide?
He is a friend of Joshua's from the military.
And did you speak with him about what had happened on August 4th, 2020?
Yes.
Did he send you screenshots of Facebook Messenger comments Joshua had made to him about Rebecca on August 4th, 2020?
Yes, he did.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 81. Are those screenshots of those Facebook Messenger, of the Facebook Messenger exchange between Joshua and Mr. Balthazar?
Yes, it is.
And can you tell the jury the time on August 4th that that first message was sent by Joshua Aide to Mr. Balthazar?
Yes, 4:34 p.m.
Can you just read that first message that Joshua has sent?
Well, I'm going to object, Your Honor, to the exhibit. The foundation's based off hearsay and insufficient.
I can lay some more foundation.
Go ahead.
So you indicated Mr. Balthazar was aware that you were interviewing him about what happened on August 4th?
Yes.
And as part of your investigation, have you had a chance to review a Facebook Messenger exchange that Rebecca had allowed officers access to between her and the defendant?
Yes, I was.
And when Mr. Balthazar provided you screenshots, did you have a chance to compare the photo of the individual identified as Joshua on the Balthazar messages to the photo identified as Joshua on the messages with Rebecca?
Yes, I did.
Does it appear to be the same Facebook profile picture?
It is the same profile picture.
Your Honor, I would ask that it be moved into evidence.
Objection?
No objection.
Can receive the exhibits.
Can you just, let me back up, can you read the time that Joshua sent that message to Mr. Balthazar?
It was August 4th at 4:34 p.m.
And what is that first message that the defendant sent to him?
That message reads, quote, "Becky is really pissing me off right now, saying she is leaving everything at the road," unquote.
As part of your investigation, did you listen to jail calls made by the defendant from the Winnebago County Jail?
Yes, I did.
Can you just describe to the jury how the jail call system works?
Yes, when you're being housed in the jail, you have a inmate identification number. You can log into the phone and make phone calls outside of the jail. All phone calls going out of the jail are recorded, and you can research by inmate name for all phone calls that an inmate has made.
Did you have a chance to listen to a call made by the defendant on August 12th, 2020, to an individual with a, to a phone number associated with a lead? 2000. And in that call, does Joshua Aide still seem to be focused on the Tahoe?
Yes, the Tahoe and other property that they were planning to exchange before the shooting.
I'd like to just play for you a portion of that call. This is the 7M jail call for Lee Hogendorf, 8/12/2020, 6:08 to 6:49.
What's the name again?
6:08 to 6:49.
Did you drive behind the barn and see if those rims and tires were there?
Yeah, I did. I was surprised to see those laying there.
Okay, that means she hasn't been out there yet. Okay.
Is somebody supposed to take those, or you need those locked up?
No, she's supposed to deliver all my shit and take those, which means she hasn't delivered any of my stuff.
Okay.
I should still be getting the Tahoe back. I played my stuff from Afghanistan back, but really what I want is a Tahoe and my stuff from Afghanistan. She can keep the rest.
Yeah.
In that same call, does he also make a statement related to officers recovering the gun he'd used?
Yes.
I'd like to play for you the same call from 11:40 to 12:15.
Did they give you my pistol back?
No.
Okay, you might want to call and ask them what happened to that stuff, because there was a Taurus Jet revolver in there too.
Is that what you used?
No.
Oh. Okay.
So,
Whatever you use as evidence, they will keep that.
yeah, there you have it.
The Taurus revolver that he's referring to, is that a firearm that was located in his vehicle during the search?
Yes, it was on the passenger floor board area.
On September 10th, 2020, did you meet with Rebecca at the Oshkosh Police Department?
Yes, I did.
And why did you meet with her?
On that date, she had turned over to me her .380 caliber handgun that was missed in the residence during the search the night of the incident.
Okay. And did she turn that over to you voluntarily?
Yes, she did.
On September 14th, 2020, did you also talk with a woman named Sharon Morgano?
Yes, I did.
And did she provide you information about that firearm that Rebecca turned over?
Yes, she provided a statement regarding how she found that firearm.
And did she provide that statement voluntarily?
Yes, she did.
As part of the investigation, did you submit evidence in this case to the crime lab?
Yes.
I'd like to talk to you first about evidence you submitted for ballistics testing. I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibits 82 and 83. Can you describe what those exhibits are?
Yes, Exhibit 82 is Oshkosh Police Department property forms for 3 shell casings, the .380 Ruger LCP pistol with the cloth holster and magazine recovered from Joshua Aide, the sealed cardboard box containing a suspected bullet, along with the transmittal form to the Wisconsin State Crime Lab for those items to be tested by the firearms examiner. Other items also included metal jacket and possible bullet from the driveway at 1715 Minnesota, and that transmittal, a bullet recovered from Rebecca Borkowski, and the transmittal for that item as well to the crime lab for testing. Exhibit 83 is a receipt from the Wisconsin State Crime Lab for all of those items that were transmitted for testing.
And so just to be clear, you submitted the 3 casings, the jacket found in the concrete seam, the bullet from Rebecca's head, the bullet from James Gruettner's head, as well as the firearm, the Ruger 380 recovered from the defendant?
That's correct.
Can I hand you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 84? Can you describe what that is?
This is the Wisconsin State Crime Lab report regarding the examination of all those items that were submitted for firearm testing.
And what were the findings?
The findings were that the 3 shell casings that were submitted and recovered at 1715 Minnesota Street were fired by the Ruger 380 recovered from Joshua A. The 2 fired projectiles were fired in and through the barrel of item D, the Ruger pistol recovered from Joshua A.
So the 2 projectiles, are you referring to the bullet in Rebecca's head and the bullet recovered from James Gruettner's head?
That's correct. And then there's a separate report concerning the metal jacket. And that was also determined to have been fired through the barrel of the Ruger pistol as well.
Thank you. I would move to admit State's Exhibits 82, 83, and 84 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection.
Accept and receive the exhibits.
Was suspected blood evidence also submitted by you to the crime lab for DNA testing?
Yes, it was.
And was that swabs of blood from the scene sent to the crime lab?
Yes,
And in conjunction with that, were DNA swabs from both Rebecca and John sent to the crime lab for comparison?
yes, as well as James.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibits 85 and 86. Can you just describe for the jury what those two documents are?
Yes, State's Exhibit 85 is a transmittal form that I had filled out regarding the blood and DNA evidence that I had submitted to the Wisconsin State Crime Lab. State's Exhibit 86 is the receipt from the crime lab documenting how they marked those items when they received them.
And does the transmittal indicate that blood sent included suspected blood from the grass by Rebecca's driveway, suspected blood from the area of James Gruettner, suspected blood from garage near the south wall, suspected blood from 1719 driveway, suspected blood from 1727 driveway, suspected blood from 1715 marker C? Are those all included?
Yes,
And it also indicates that there were buccal swabs from both Rebecca and John, and a DNA card from James.
yes.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 87. And can you tell me what that is?
This is the Wisconsin State Crime Lab report on the DNA analysis and their findings.
And regarding items H, the blood swab from the grass by Rebecca's driveway, and item M, the blood from Rebecca's driveway, 1715, who did that return to?
Those all returned to John Miller.
And then moving on to the blood found at 1719 and 1727, items K and L, who did that, oh, let me back up. The blood swabs from those driveways at those addresses, who did that return to?
Those also identified John Miller as the source of that blood.
And regarding item J, the blood near the south wall of Rebecca's garage, who did that return to?
That identified Rebecca Borkowski as the source of that blood.
State would move exhibits 85, 86, and 87 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection.
Accept and receive the exhibits.
Now, as this case moved on, did you have an opportunity to listen to a jail call, a portion of a jail call from September 10th, 2020 between the defendant and a man named Lee Hogendorf?
Yes.
In that call, were you concerned that the defendant was asking Lee to make up a story about Rebecca?
Yes.
I'd like to play for you a portion of that call. Okay, this will be on the thumb drive, we will exhibit 7, and this would be 7N. This is jail call to Lee Hogendorf, September 10th, 2020, playing 12:10 to 12:20.
No, I agree, but like I said, with that pointing the weapon at me, you're going to have to make that story sound good, like you saw the whole thing.
So he's saying, like I said, with that pointing the weapon at me, you're going to have to make that story sound good, like you saw the whole thing.
Yes.
And he starts that out by saying, like I said. You listened to previous jail calls to this, right?
Yes, I did.
All previous jail calls to this?
If not all, just about every single one, yes.
Do you recall the parties speaking about any incident of Rebecca pointing a weapon at the defendant?
No.
Are you aware of whether Joshua Aide was communicating with Lee Hogendorf by letter?
Yes, he was indicating many times in his phone calls that letters were going out to Lee. He would be sending him multiple letters per week.
And did this Lee ever make a report to you or any of the officers of the Oshkosh Police Department about a story about Rebecca pointing a firearm at him?
No, he did not.
And subsequent to this call, did it appear that the defendant was talking to Lee further about coordinating this story?
Yes.
And what was the context of that?
Just more conversation about, Rebecca and their relationship and not getting along well.
Let me ask you a different question. Did it sound as though there were investigators that the defendant was instructing Lee to make a report to?
Yes.
Were those investigators employees of your department?
No, my understanding is they were defense investigators that he was giving a statement to.
And were there, subsequent to this call that we just heard about making the story about Rebecca sound good, were there conversations about making a report to those investigators?
Yes.
I have no further questions.
Cross-examination.
Detective Artz, now, would it be fair to summarize your role in the investigation as the lead investigator?
Yes.
And after you had drafted the search warrant for Rebecca's residence, then you had Detective Fry execute that? Was he the one in charge of executing that?
He was one of many detectives that were on scene at the residence to conduct that search warrant.
Detective Fry is the one that brought the crime scene vehicle, correct?
I believe that was brought out shortly after this incident happened. When I arrived on scene, I had coordinated with Detective Hankey to follow one of the victims to Theta Clark Hospital, Detective Robertson to accompany Rebecca Borkowski. Detective Fry was to to handle the scene, so he brought the crime scene van out. I was in charge of the search warrant, and I had Detective Wilson and Detective Bang at the police department coordinating with other jurisdictions to attempt to take Mr. Aide into custody.
So Detective Fry was to handle the scene, correct? That's how you summarize it, or his role?
At the beginning of the investigation, yes, and then once other people freed up, the search warrant was completed and several of them handled it then.
And then you traveled down to Oregon Police Department to take custody of Joshua Aide, correct?
Yes,
And we heard some recordings regarding your interaction with Mr. Aide at the police department, correct?
yes,
And he disagreed with you when you had told him that he had murdered someone, correct?
yes,
And I believe twice you had characterized it when you by telling Josh that he was being taken into custody for murdering someone, and he disagreed with that both times, correct?
yes,
And then we heard another snippet of that recording where you told Josh that you weren't going to give him the privilege or pleasure of knowing who he had killed, correct?
yes,
And before that, though, do you recall you told Josh that he was being charged with 1 count of first-degree intentional homicide and 2 counts of attempted homicide? Do you recall telling Josh that?
yes,
And you told him that he would be getting a complaint and he could figure it all out in court. Do you recall that?
yes,
And it was after that that he made denials about the term that we heard disagreeing with you that he killed someone after you said it was in relation to what you told him he was being charged with, correct?
no, he had already, several times prior to that, with Greene County as well, indicated he had no idea why he was in custody or what was going on.
But with you, he disagreed with the term when you were telling him that he had murdered somebody, correct?
I would consider his denial to me was that he had no idea why he was in custody. It wasn't because of the term kill.
But you did tell him that he was being charged with first-degree intentional homicide and 2 counts of attempted first-degree homicide, correct?
That is correct.
Now, you testified that you met with Rebecca on September 10th, correct?
Yes,
And at that meeting, she turned over to you her .380 pistol, correct?
yes,
And you termed it that it was the pistol, quote, that was missed during the search, end quote.
yes,
And you based that opinion that it was missed during the search because of what Rebecca told you, correct?
Rebecca's aunt as well, yes.
And you didn't ask, really, you didn't question that at all when Rebecca's aunt and Rebecca told you that this pistol was missed during the search, correct?
No,
Now, we had listened to some jail calls that you had listened to of Josh while he was in jail, correct?
yes,
And you recall listening to jail calls of Josh on August 19th, 2020 from the jail?
not specifically, but I'm sure I did.
Do you recall doing a supplement about it?
No,
If I may approach.
You may.
Your Honor, I would object to the defense going into this. These are statements from the defendant. The defendant can testify if he wants to present his own statement.
Hold on a minute.
Okay, I recall it.
So have you had an opportunity now to review the supplement that you drafted regarding the jail calls you listened to?
Yes, sir.
And you testified that now your recollection is refreshed regarding these jail calls?
Yes.
And in fact, in the jail call on August 19th, 2020, which was approximately 3 weeks before you met with Rebecca when she turned in her 380, correct?
Yes.
And during that jail call, you had heard Josh speak with an Aaron Spice, correct?
Yes.
And during that call, Josh had speculated Aaron Spice.
I'm gonna sustain the objection, it's not a statement of party opponent. Can't get into it.
Well, Your Honor, is just going to go regarding the missing gun issue, which the officer already testified.
Can't claim it was not a statement of party opponent.
Let me ask you this, Detective Artz. Did you have reason to believe, prior to Rebecca coming to the police department on September 10th and turning in her gun, that a gun may have been missing from the crime scene?
I did not have reason to believe there was a gun missing from the crime scene, which I considered to be outside in the garage area.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I had no reason to believe there was a gun missing from the crime scene, which was the driveway and garage area.
Well, we've heard crime scene defined differently here throughout the course of this trial. Would you agree that the crime scene also extended to Dan Schrader's residence where John Miller fled to?
Well, that's part of the scene. I don't know that's the crime scene, but yes, that's part of the scene.
Would you consider the scene to be Rebecca's house?
It's not part of the crime scene, it's part of the scene.
Well, you drafted a search warrant for Rebecca's house, correct?
Correct.
Looking for evidence of a crime, correct?
Correct.
And so did you not have cause to believe on September 10th, when you met with Rebecca, that evidence in the form of a pistol was missing from either the scene or the crime scene?
I'm sorry, can you state that again?
Did you have reason to believe prior to meeting with Rebecca on September 10th, when she turned in her pistol, that there may have been a pistol missing from the scene or the crime scene?
No.
Do you recall drafting a supplement with information
I'm
pertaining
going to
to?
object again, Your Honor. This goes to statements made by the defendant, and again, he's going to have to testify if he wants to put his statements before the jury.
I can't hear you when you talk away from the mic.
I'm sorry, Your Honor. The defense is trying to go into statements the defendant himself made. He's going to have to testify if he wants those statements before the jury.
I didn't ask for any particular statement. I'm just asking if he had cause to believe or evidence that a gun may have been missing from the scene prior
To
to.
answer that question, no. Let's move on.
Now, you testified that you listened to a jail call between Josh and Lee Hilgendorf, correct?
I did listen to several, yes.
Several. And to one of them regarding an incident where Josh talked about Rebecca pointing a gun at him, correct?
Yes.
And something to the effect that Josh said about Lee would have to make that good or tell that good or something along those lines, correct?
Make it sound like he saw it.
Was there any date associated with this incident of that Lee may have or supposedly saw Rebecca point a gun at Josh?
No.
So from the context of it or explicitly in the words, you don't know if they were talking about August 4th, 2020 or some
for some event earlier in time.
That's correct.
Now, at any point on August 4th, 2020, did you have occasion to go to Mercy Medical Center?
I did not.
Nothing further, thank you.
I have no further questions.
You may step down.
And I would just ask that the exhibit, I believe 7B2, be returned with the officer to the OPD evidence room. I understand that there's a stipulation of the defense as to that.
No objection.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'll send you in for a break. We'll be back in about 15 minutes.
Rise to the jury. Yes, both folks leave here.
Please be seated. Three more witnesses?
Yes, that is correct.
Give me an idea how long?
The analyst is probably going to be at least an hour, so we could potentially get through the other two by the end of the day. So we could potentially get through them all.
Okay.
I just have one thing, Judge. After Detective Brett Robertson was finished testifying, you asked the state if they had any redirect. They said no, and then he was excused. I'd like him to remain under the defense subpoena.
I have no objection to that.
You shall. All right. Let's take a break for 15 minutes. Back here 2:45. We'll just take the next witness.
Thank you.
It's so stiff. I know I bet it is. I can hardly move. God, I'm showing my age.